This game is a game within a series that is basically a sister series to another long-running series, and this is the only game within the sister series that I had played when I got this game. And this game was released on the PS2, but I eventually got it on my Xbox 360 not too long after I got my Xbox 360. I'm talking about Samurai Warriors 2. Samurai Warriors is basically the sister series to Dynasty Warriors, but the best way I can describe this is that it's Dynasty Warriors, but in Japan. Everything is based on old Japanese traditions, as opposed to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms from China. And it has all of the things that you would expect from one of these types of games, you know, running around, choosing a character, killing loads of bad guys. Apart from this one, I remember being really hard. I remember really struggling with the opening levels on this game. I had to turn the difficulty down so I could stand a chance. I really don't have too much to say mechanics-wise about this game. What I do remember is that the Extreme Legends variation of this game on the Xbox 360 was released as DLC, and it was very expensive, I remember that, which I never bothered getting that. As for the leveling system, I remember the main connecting feature within each of the characters, the universals rather, was money. You collected money and you could spend the money on any character, regardless of which character you used to collect that money with. And you could spend this money on different abilities and powering them up. I do remember in one of the levels with one of the characters, I ran into this problem where it was just really hard for some reason. I don't know why. I think it was just a difficulty spike. I get a feeling that it wasn't meant to be like that. But I think like the main general just like ran into one of the enemy bases or something along those lines. But aside from that, yeah, this was a really nifty, nice little game that I had on my Xbox 360. It was around the end of 2014 where I just felt in the mood to play an open world racing game, because I hadn't done so for a while. Thankfully, also around this time, I managed to go onto the PlayStation Network and I managed to find that Need for Speed Most Wanted was available at a discount through PS Plus. And so I got this game and I like it. There seems to be a particular brand of racing game that they have released, which is rather a new-ish concept, I suppose. It's something that they really, at least to my knowledge, introduced in the 7th generation, where you will have this open world and there'll be all these things around for you to collect. Although when I say collect, I don't necessarily mean pick up, I just mean do, like smash through these gates or whatever. And this game was basically one of those. You did go around and you did smash through these billboards, and what I remember happening was that whenever you saw one of these billboards, it would have a image of whoever on your friends list managed to smash through it with the greatest airtime or cover the largest amount of distance. And so I remember going around this city and I would just see this guy's face plastered all over these billboards everywhere. It's quite funny actually, but also kind of silly, which I suppose is kind of the same thing in a way. Also, things you can find extra cars lying around, and if you find a car, you can switch into that car, so then you can then use that car, and it gets added to your inventory. There are also all these objectives that you have to accomplish, some basic ones being the races, some others being where you have to escape from the cops, and there's another type where you have to gain a particular level of speed, which is kind of strange. And all these races would take place in this like open world, this city, but with particular racetracks segmented off. Which is typical open world design really, you know. Freedom to go absolutely anywhere while starting a mission, and then when you enter a mission, this is the exact thing you have to do. Which I suppose makes more sense in a racing game, because racing games, or rather the act of racing itself, is all about focusing all your attention on what's happening here and now. But you could also upgrade the cars as well by using them so much. So for example, if you use the boost, you would upgrade your engine to increase the boost, and the more that you slide it around, the more you'd be able to upgrade the tyres, that type of thing. And this is one of those games I think really fits into a particular type of category that I think is a really nice category of games, and that is ones where you can just pick it up and play it for a bit, and whilst you do have that level of investment in it where you are obviously building up and working towards something over time and trying to complete all these goals, you can still just load it up at any time and don't have to worry about having to pay attention to the story or anything along those lines. And I think for being one of those types of games, this one is really good at doing that. I should also probably clarify that I'm talking about Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012, because I realised that there was another version of this game that came out previous, or rather it was just a different game with the same name, and I honestly think that this practice of naming games after other games that already exists is so stupid. I really hate it when games do that. But yeah, just to clarify, this is the 2012 game I'm talking about here. My first memory of being exposed to this game was one time where me, my brother and my mum, we went to this travel agency. And I remember we went there in the past to exchange our money into foreign currency whenever we went on holiday. And one particular time I remember at the side they had a PS2 on display and there was one game playing on it, and I think the controller was broken because I don't remember actually playing it, but it did like that whole title screen thing where you would see the title screen and then after a while it would then phase into a demo, and I remember watching this demo and I became interested in this game. I didn't actually have a PS2 at this point, I don't think, so it wasn't something that I knew I could just go and get straight away or anything like that. And it wasn't necessarily one of the very first PS2 games I got. I actually waited a bit of time and then eventually I saw it in a shop and I got it. Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. So this is the platform game that Naughty Dog released once they had finished with Crash Bandicoot basically, and I don't really remember if I knew that it was Naughty Dog straight up. I mean, I probably would have recognised the logo, but I don't remember how much that really stood out to me. But what did stand out to me was the way that the levels were structured, and I think this is a thing that a lot of people noticed at this time as well, because in this game all the levels were connected. You never had a level select screen, so to speak. You did have the introduction level, where you were told about the base mechanics, such as spin attacks, dash attacks, double jumping, and all that lot. And there were a few extra things as well, such as collecting the blue eco, which will give you an electric charge that will allow you to run faster for a bit, but also you have to carry that to a specific point so that you can utilize it and open up a gate or release loads of these precursor orbs for you to collect. And precursor orbs is one of the main collectibles in this game. But after that first level you appear in the Greed Sage's hut, and it's from that point on that you can see that all of the levels are connected. So you can head from that point on and just go straight to the beach, or you can go to the jungle. And although areas are segmented off, such as there'll be times where you'll have to cross this lava on this machine and you will need so many power cells in order to be able to activate it, everything is still connected. And there are levels where it does feel like it is kind of like a hub world. It does kind of connect these different levels together. There is no transitions between each of the levels, you just walk between areas, which I suppose kind of made it a little bit confusing as well as to what counted for what. So for example, there was these bugs that you could collect, and sometimes you could collect, say, 3 in one area, then you walk off a bit and you find another one, but that's not part of the same set. So I remember being a bit confused by that. But yeah, I really like this game. I did complete it, as in I did get to the final boss and defeat the final boss, but I didn't collect all of the power cells being the main collectible. The precursor orbs are also like a secondary collectible basically, apart from their biggest use is to spend them in order to get more power cells. So there may be characters around that will be asking for so many precursor orbs, and you give them however many they ask for and they'll give you a power cell. And so level wise the game is divided, I would say, into 3 distinct phases. So you have the first area with the jungle and Sentinel Beach and that lot, then you cross over the lava pits and you get to the second area, which I would say is my favourite part of the game, where it's all by the water and there's this level where you go onto this machine and you travel down into this underground base under the water. And there's also that level where you've got to ride around on that weird hover bike thing, which is interesting. I mean, it's enjoyable, but it can be irritating at times. And then eventually you can get to the final area where it's all like lava and there's that snowy mountain. But I just got to say that I do think that the whole connected areas and all that lot is a very interesting design choice that was new to me when I first saw it. And I did, at the time, really like how I could think of areas in terms of where they were relative to other areas. You didn't jump through a portal and then appear somewhere else. Not saying that that's necessarily a bad game design thing at all. I think, we can have new games that do that, and I think that the whole everything has to be an open world or a connected world is something that games are taking a bit too far these days, but it was nice at the time. I really liked it. Also, what was interesting at the time as well was how it was a constantly developing story. Not so much that there was like a lot of story, but just that you would go to new areas and there'd be NPCs around and you'd talk to them, and that's how you would get the power cells. And I know I say this after having played Spyro 2 and 3, so I don't know why it should have seemed like such a big thing, but it is something that stood out to me. I should also probably point out that whilst I didn't get 100% of this game on the PS2, I did get 100% eventually when it came out on the PS3 as the Jak and Daxter collection, which was released on PS Plus for free. I have praised several times before when games take a very simple concept and turn it into something much bigger, and this is no exception here. This game I was introduced to my friend Alex from university because he had it on his PC. I had it on my PSP afterwards, after seeing him play it, and later on down the line when I got an Xbox 360, I downloaded it for that as well. I am talking about the original Puzzle Quest Challenge of the Warlords. I have mentioned Puzzle Quest Galactrix before, and I've talked about that game, and this game is basically the same kind of idea, apart from it has a much more medieval, Tolkien-esque type tone, if you know what I mean, where you'll have knights and dungeons and orcs and bats and rats and all that sort of stuff. But with it having a square grid, I also think it's much easier to contextualize when looking at it. So you have on these boards 4 different types of magic orb thingy, where you can switch 2 things that are adjacent to each other, like in Bejeweled, which will cause them to disappear if you manage to match 3 of them, and if it's 3 of these orbs, you will get the element of whatever colour corresponds to it. And this is something I am curious about, because it's obvious that fire should be red and water should be blue, but when it comes to yellow and green, which one should be wind and which one should be earth? What do you think? Now, I feel that earth should be green and wind should be yellow. I don't know if I can justify that, but that's just the way that feels right to me. But I know there are different games that do it differently. But aside from that, you'll also have the skull icons, which will do damage if you match them to your opponent. You will have the purple stars, which will give you experience. And you'll have the coins, which will give you money. Pretty self-explanatory there with an image there. And as you play through the game, you will level up and you will learn new abilities, and abilities cost so much mana of a particular element. So it might cost 3 fires and 1 blue to use this particular ability, and it might be something like deal so much damage to your opponent, or it might change something on the board, or it might give you an extra turn, or it might give you some more of a different type of element. And so there's a nice element of customizing and strategy involved in that, and I really like that. And also, when you level up, you can choose different things to upgrade, such as how much of a particular element you can hold at once, or how much of a particular element that you start with. Just all these different things that you can spend points on to upgrade your character in these different ways. Now, there is a quick play mode, which I really think is a good idea, where you can just select it and then you'll be put up against an enemy, and the purpose of this fight is just to earn your experience. And of course you do earn experience by actually winning the battle, you don't just get it from matching these purple stars together. But the main game itself is like an actual RPG, where you go out and you can travel between all these different towns. You can complete quests for people, you can buy equipment, you can buy weapons, customize your character in all these different ways, and I think that this is just a lot of fun to play. Also, something as well to look out for is when trying to match things on this board, if you can match 4 together as opposed to just 3, you will get an extra turn, so always try to look for that as well. And you can also get these wild cards that will match up against any type of elemental orb thing. So yeah, keep an eye out for those things, and it's just an enjoyable game. Now, this is a game that I got based on the title alone. I didn't really know anything about this particular game, but I remember buying this game, and when I first tried it out, I was rather confused because it didn't seem right the way that everything was set up. And I remember going to my friend Bridget's house and playing it there, and slowly but surely getting to grips with the mechanics of this game. I remember my friend Josh also got this game, apart from because he had a Game Boy player on his GameCube, he was able to play it on his TV, so I was able to watch him play it on his TV screen, whereas I was just playing it on my Game Boy Advance. And I never really took this game so seriously, I never really delved into it. That is until we went to Disneyland, because we went there by bus, and let me tell you, that bus journey was so long. Ages, and I spent pretty much the entire journey there and the entire journey back playing this game. This game being Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. What originally confused me about this game was the fact that battles took place on a grid, so you actually had to move your characters around, and at the time it seemed really finicky and just fiddly, and I really didn't like it. But I did get used to it, although this game does have quite a lot of weird mechanics that people tend to not like, and there are certain ways that you can kind of cheat the system as well. For example, the thing that people mostly don't like is the law mechanic, where whenever you enter a battle, there's going to be a law against something, and basically if you do the thing that the law says that you can't do, then you will get a card from the judge, and he'll eventually send that character to prison if they use the thing too much. And what's really annoying is when the thing that's outlawed is something like attacking your opponent or dealing damage, something that you would have to do anyway. But I found a way that you can kind of cheat this, because the laws always cycle in a particular fashion, and every time you take a step it would cycle on to the next law. So if you can sort of time your movements between the different zones and run into enemies at the optimal times, you can pretty much decide the laws straight up. Later on you can buy these cards which you can use to bypass these laws, which is interesting, but I think that the fact that I found out that you can sort of trick the system this way made it so I didn't really need to do that. There are also good laws as well, where the judge will praise you for doing the thing that is the good thing, and he'll do this by giving that character 1 JP, JP being a judge point. And you also get characters to get judge points by killing enemies, and the reason you want judge points is because when a character has 10 judge points they can unleash their Totema, which is sort of like a summon, but not really a summon because there's a summon job class which is separate to that, so that's what you'd want those for. I also found out that you can really gain loads of experience, not AP but experience, by setting your characters up into work in a very strict cycle. So for example, you could kill all of the enemies but one and send it to sleep, and then continuously make your other characters attack each other, then get the white mage to heal them, and then send this other one to sleep or something, because the amount of experience you get, it's always 100 experience between each level, but healing will always give you something like 10 experience or something like that. And so you could go through this cycle and build up experience that way, and I did that quite a bit. This game also works on a very strict quest system, so you accept a quest and then you can go out and do the quest. But you will also have these enemies that will just wander around and try to take over the different areas on the map. But the development system for the characters is rather complicated, given that you can get so many characters. I think the best line of advice I can really give is to not invest in so many characters, because you will just get loads and loads of characters. And each character is of a particular race, and each race has access to a limited amount of jobs. And as each job, you can learn abilities based on the equipment that you give that character, based based on whatever job they are. So say if you have a sword with a time mage ability on it, for example, you can give that sword to somebody, but they'll only learn that ability if they are a time mage. And in fact, even if they haven't learnt the ability yet, but they are a time mage, they can use the ability for whilst the weapon is equipped, but that it would then take you mastering that ability in order for them to then have access to that time mage ability as a time mage or with the time magic ability equipped, but without the necessary equipment equipped, if you get what I mean. And there are a lot of weapons, and I really like the theming of the weapons because there's loads of weapons that are references to previous Final Fantasy games that are like ultimate weapons like Ragnarok and Lionheart, which are just like regular weapons that you would expect to be like the best weapons, but they're not. They're just there. And so it's really nice, but it also does get rather complicated as there is so much there to keep track of at once. And one of the things I think about when I think of Disneyland is this game, which may sound sad, but it is. I mean, I enjoy Disneyland as well, but when I think of Disneyland, I think of the bus journey, I think of this game.